Jambo, jambo bwana, habari gani? Nzuri sana. Wageni mwakaribishwa, Kenya yetu hakuna matata.
We're having dinner, and one of the girls said, "Well, why don't we go climb Kilimanjaro?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." And we said, "Yeah, let's try to see if we can summit Kilimanjaro in less than 48 hours, shirtless or in shorts."
Do you think mountaineers and mountain climbers would benefit on these breathing techniques, Buteyko and Wim Hof Method?
Absolutely, no doubt. I mean, I was up at 6,000 meters without any altitude sickness symptoms, without having acclimatized to the mountain. So I would just be walking at a normal pace, and then I would just go sort of like pump myself up with a lot of oxygen. So what you're doing with this method is you're almost simulating high altitude, low oxygen environments. Suddenly I realized, oh my God, I'm able to turn back, at least psychologically, turn back the biological clock by just changing the nutrition. I really haven't gotten sick in the past 3 years. If I start to get a cold, I double up on the breathing, do a little bit more cold showers, in 24 hours it's gone.
Kilimanjaro.
I am Tommy and this is Surfer of Life. Today's guest is Stephen Posner. You have more than 25 years of experience in launching and scaling media, technology and brand-driven businesses in Europe and the US. Over the past year you have taken a quasi-sabbatical year with the main purpose to do a full hardware and software upgrade of your mind, body and soul for the next 50 years of your life. Your passion is unleashing human potential and biohacking. Recently you became a certified Wim Hof Method Instructor, so now you are teaching also others to find their hidden powers. Stephen, so glad to have you here. Welcome.
Well, Tommy, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm very excited. First time I do a podcast, so I hope I do a good job.
You will for sure. I know that.
I'm very excited.
You just recently came back from summiting Kilimanjaro, and I really want to talk about that expedition. But first of all, how does it feel to be back in Spain?
Well, it feels great. It feels a little bit strange, just from having done something that was the center of planning and training and preparing for about 6 months, and something that really seemed to be totally impossible, and then sort of come back and realized, I did it. We did it, and almost like you have this little secret superpower that you didn't know you had. And suddenly you're back into everyday life, but there's something inside of you that really just gives you a feeling of you have a secret, you have a power that you've really developed inside yourself. So it's a lot of fun, actually.
So exciting to talk about, or excited to talk about that expedition of the Kilimanjaro. I really want to dive deeper into that. But you have other stuff that you're passionate about, and first, I want to talk about natural biohacking. So what can we gain by biohacking ourselves? And what can it do to our body, mind, and soul?
Everything. And I am by no means an expert. There are, some very, very deep experts in the field, guys like Ben Greenfield and a bunch of others. I'm a student, and I've been learning. And, I think a little bit of the brief background is obviously the Wim Hof method has a lot to do with it. Because I remember about a year and a half ago when I did my first more intense winter experience in Poland for 5 days, and suddenly found myself at the top of this Mount Śnieżka in minus 25 degrees Celsius weather in shorts and not feeling cold at all. And I said, how can this actually be? And then suddenly focusing on my hand and sort of like pushing blood and muscles and suddenly warming up parts of my body. I said, how is it that I'm able to do this? I don't really understand it. And suddenly I started to realize that there's just tremendous capabilities that we have that are just simply innate and natural, but they're dormant, they're asleep. What then got me a little bit deeper into this whole biohacking thing is, my father died of a heart attack when he was 65. And all of us kids, for the past 15 years have been getting heart checks every year, 2 years, or 3 years. And my heart has always been really good. But my last checkup last April, the doctor said the heart is great, but your cholesterol levels are really high. And the bad cholesterol, the LDL, and the LDL particle count is also very, very high. And I want you to go on Lipitor, which is a drug to reduce cholesterol for 6 weeks and see what happens. And I came back to him and I said, wait a second. If I'm not going to die of a heart attack in the next 3 to 6 months, I'd like to attack this from a nutritional perspective. And he said, you're wasting your time. Your case is genetic. I didn't listen to him. And I basically just did nutritional changes. And started doing a little bit more exercise and eating a little bit healthier. And I did a blood test a month later, and my cholesterol had dropped 40%. And I was like, wait a second. How can this be that just by making some of these changes, I can have such a drastic influence on something that a leading expert, because this is a very good cardiologist, said your case is absolutely genetic. And that just sort of opened a lot of questioning about what are the habits that we have and how we live our life and how that actually affects, different parts of our body, our mind, and also our soul. And that just led to this idea that I really wanted to learn a lot more about biohacking in a very natural way. So things that you do normally, but just by changing different habits. So it's not about suddenly injecting yourself with blood transfusions and trying to do a bunch of chemically driven things, but just stuff by changing what you do. So with the Wim Hof method, you breathe. And by breathing, you change your physiology, you change your immune response, you change your pain thresholds, you improve your mood. So I just really got very passionate about delving deep into all of this. Was
this before or after your first trip to Poland?
That was after. That was after the first trip to Poland. The first trip to Poland was December of 2017.
Yeah, that's 2007.
Yeah.
How did you actually start your personal research? What was the trigger for that?
It's just I would say almost by accident. I had this idea after I went to Poland. I mean, you're going to laugh about this because in our group in Poland, there are about 60 people, but we're divided into 3 groups. And in our group, it was just 20 guys. And all of them were incredibly fit. And I was in okay shape, but I just sort of felt, oh my God, these are a bunch of 30-year-olds that look like out of some type of Chippendales show, and they sort of inspired me to get into shape and to really think about how do I want to be when I turn 50, which was last year, and I decided that I really want to attack my nutrition, I want to attack my fitness, I want to attack my physiology. I want to, attack my mind, my soul, and just started researching a bunch of different things. I then came across Mind Valley. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Mind Valley, and just started to find some great courses. Some of the leading experts in fitness, in brain, in meditation, and I started to do some of these courses. And realized, wow, there's a lot of great content out there. There's a lot of tools. There's a lot of things that you can apply very easily in your life. And just started to sort of cobble together my own little curriculum of things. And then I made, as I was winding down my last venture, which was a virtual reality studio, I decided that, this year, where I turned 50, I want to do this upgrade of sort of hardware and software, as you mentioned at the start, of my mind, body, and soul. And all started with this idea that there's 2 fundamental things that really matter. One is what you believe, and what you believe you can do, and what you believe you can't do. And the other thing is your habits. What are the habits on a daily basis and the routines that you have that support you? And I decided that I wanted to live to be 100. Obviously, it's a decision, but I can't really control it. But suddenly I said, if I live to be 100 and I'm literally in my halfway point, I want to upgrade the systems so that the next 50 years of life are as good as possible. And then it dawned on me that, from the time I graduated to college to 50, there were 30 years. And so if I do this, it's kind of like I'm back in college. I have another 30 years to be able to do whatever I want. And then, when I'm 80, I still have 20 years of life. And if I take care of myself, I can do some really cool, fun things. But in terms of the research, it really, one thing led to another and led to another and led to another and led to another and started to build this, this sort of personal curriculum in different areas.
You mentioned about different type of tools for biohacking yourself. Tell me more about the tools you're using at the moment and what have been the most effective ones for you.
So I think definitely the Wim Hof method and the breathing, and we'll get into this when we talk a little bit more about Kilimanjaro, is something that is just incredibly profound because it touches so many different systems in the body in terms of the central nervous system, the immune system, the adrenal system, the endocrine system. So just with that method alone, you're already changing your body chemistry. You're changing your mood. You're changing your physiology. I really haven't gotten sick in the past 3 years. If I start to get a cold, I double up on the breathing, do a little bit more cold showers, in 24 hours, it's gone. So, that's a very, it's a very simple tool, but it's also very, very profound. I think it might not be technically a biohack, but I think rewriting your nutrition is probably one of the most profound biohacks that you can do. So through Mind Valley, I did this course, which is absolutely fantastic, and I recommend it to everyone, called Wild Fit, which I would say is almost like about 70% paleo-esque in its philosophy. But basically it mixes behavioral psychology with an elimination diet to change your relationship with food. And I wasn't overweight, but if I could lose 2 or 3 kilos, that would be fine. And suddenly through this process, I ended up losing 9 kilos. So I had this goal at 50 to sort of be back in better shape or as good shape as I was in my 30s. And suddenly I'm back to the waist size, the weight, and even in better shape than I was there. So suddenly I realized, oh my God, I'm able to turn back, at least psychologically, turn back the biological clock by just changing the nutrition, getting rid of sugar, getting rid of dairy, getting rid of wheat, and dialing up a lot of green veggies, high quality proteins, reducing carbohydrates. So I would say that nutrition is probably one of the most powerful biohacks in a sense, because you change a couple things and that really changes a lot of things in your body. You start to have more energy, you're more resilient. So you start to combine some breathing with some nutrition. I think the next one is, and there's a lot of depth in just the whole process of fitness. And especially when you start to get into sort of the minimum effective dose type of exercise that really builds up growth hormone, a thing called BDNF also that they call sort of miracle growth for the brain, where you're really improving mitochondrial density, you're improving your metabolic rate, you're really just improving all of the systems within the body. So you start to add this, so for me, the body part of it sort of comes from this mix of breathing techniques, nutrition, and fitness. And with those 3 pillars, I mean, you sort of can bulletproof yourself in a very natural way without having to take any type of chemical or inject yourself with anything to try to improve your system.
It seems like there's a lot of stuff going on. Thinking about the biohacking, you're figuring out things and finding out the different researches and really experiencing it by yourself. Can you over-biohack yourself?
I think you definitely can. I think you can become obsessive with it. And I think, to me, I think about just the metaphor of resilience in terms of, getting strong, but sometimes, like if you have a rubber band, you stretch, It's rather than being a super hardcore biohacker, like there's a bunch of people out there, it's like I just wanted to change the baseline of lifestyle habits so that the base of how I live and what I do is more efficient. So if I go into some of the fitness stuff, for example, the great thing about minimum effective dose is that your routines can be 4 to 15 minutes. So you can go to the gym, do 4 to 15 minutes of exercise, get into the sauna, do a little cold water, and you're in and out in 45 minutes. And that's way more efficient than spending an hour and a half every day at the gym. So suddenly, rather than overdoing stuff, you become a lot more efficient. And you also layer in recovery and recuperation. So you're not going hardcore all the time, because I think that can get nuts. And again, you listen to some of Ben Greenfield's podcasts that are great, but there's some things that he does that I just think are just way too extreme. I'm not into that. So for me, I get inspired by these people that are doing amazing things and just bring in the things that sort of fit into my life as a new baseline of habits and routines.
Yeah, because I've experienced it myself when I was practicing of becoming a Wim Hof Method Instructor, as you are right now. Mm-hmm. I was overdoing the cold exposure for sure. Mm-hmm. I was every day. I was in my freezer tank, from 2 to 4 minutes, and then suddenly it happened. Like I couldn't really withstand the cold anymore.
Yeah.
And it just stuck into me and I couldn't get rid of it. I couldn't actually recover. Then I realized, okay, it's in every situation that when you overdo stuff, like you said, stretching the rubber band too much, it's just too much. So what's your advice to people who are now starting to do these things? Is it very important to listen to your body and your mind as well and not just the instructions?
Yeah, no, I think if there's anything to me, and again, we can talk about this in the Kili, because to me, sort of Kilimanjaro was sort of a final exam of sorts. What these things can do is really build up your ability to listen to yourself and listen to your body, and also listen to your mind, and that's self-awareness. So if suddenly I find myself that a little bit overtired, the muscles just don't feel good, a day of rest is perfect. Or 2, or 3, or a week. And then you pick it back up again. If suddenly I'm supposed to have a day of rest, but the body feels great and, sort of wants a little bit more exercise, the same. If one day I'm tired of, having green juices and really healthy stuff, I'll have a piece of chocolate cake. It's not the end of the world. I mean, I just, I think you need to have a level of balance. And I see like a lot of this philosophy that I'm building into my life is a little bit like a North Star. It's something that guides you, but it doesn't dictate. It doesn't control your life, because I'm not that type of person. I'm not that obsessive. I like to have rules to be able to break them. I'd like to have routines, to have structure, but sometimes I like to not be so constrained by my own routines. So I think flexibility is really important, and to do that, you really need to develop that awareness of listening to yourself, listening to your body, listening to your thoughts.
What have been the people's reactions around you when they've obviously seen results and change in you?
Well, they want to know what I did. and what I'm doing, and sort of what's the magic solution. And it's not so much that there's a magic solution, there's a pill. It's a change of habits. I mean, this is one of the things that to me perhaps is the most profound thing. 70 or 80% of what we do on a daily basis is all habits and routines. And we just do it over and over and over and over and over again. And when you take a step back and you start to question some of those routines, and this sort of started for me, when I did this one brain course with a guy called Jim Quick called Super Brain, where he talked about his first hour of the day. And I said, I never really thought about my first hour of the day. And he has a very specific routine of what he does as soon as he wakes up. It's not checking the phone. It's not seeing what emails you have. It's not checking Facebook and your social media, but it's waking up and taking care of yourself. So I started to sort of implement the discipline of waking up, doing 10, 15 minutes of Wim Hof breathing, 10, 15 minutes of exercise, some meditation, cold shower. And when I would do that, the rest of the day felt different. So I'm not radically changing things. I'm just swapping things. So instead of taking the elevator, you take the stairs. Instead of eating the bread when you're sitting at lunch, you put the bread aside because you know you don't need it. You know you don't want it. So you start to make these little changes. And after a while, they become new habits, which means that it doesn't take effort. It's just the natural way of how you do things.
Yeah. Little things that really matter during the day.
Yeah.
What about you? You seem like you're really passionate about this stuff.
Yes.
Is this your passion?
Well, it's sort of turning. I'm thinking about it almost like an accidental passion. The funny thing is, I'm the type of person I've done a lot of different things. But I've also never really had a super clear idea of what I wanted to do. Everything was very opportunistic. Sort of I stumbled on a business opportunity or an investment. I would get deeply involved. Some of them worked, some of them didn't. But I wasn't, one of these individuals that had a very clear mission in life. And I used to call it sort of hunting for my purple frog. Like there is this purple frog in the Amazon that I personally need to save. And I never found that purple frog. But from what I've done in the past year, I really have gotten very inspired and very passionate about how a lot of people, and myself included in that, sort of live life in a very autopilot type of way. And suddenly time passes and you realize, is this exactly what I wanted to do? Is this what I wanted to accomplish? So that's why I took this quasi-sabbatical year saying, I don't want to be that person. I want to take some time to stop doing and start being and working from the inside out. And suddenly this interest area has really blossomed. And I'm right now in the process of figuring out, okay, can this actually be my next professional venture? How do I take all of the things that I've been learning, the mix of the Wim Hof Method and all these other biohacking things, and perhaps that that be the next venture. And so I'm on that path of defining that, because one of the things that I do realize is there are people that are inspired by what I've been doing, and I am by no means an exceptional individual. I'm actually a very normal person, and I just decided to change the programs, literally the software that runs in my brain about what I believe and what are some of the habits, and started to see some very noticeable change. And I find a lot of people that are very interested in that, and there's so much out there. All of the information is out there, but it's how do you really pull all of this stuff together in a way that you can start to implement it in your life in a sustainable way, because there is all these programs, all these things out there. The question is, how do they stick so that it does become lasting change?
What was your main purpose of becoming a Wim Hof Method Instructor by yourself?
It's a very good question. I became very passionate and very interested in the method. I started about maybe 4 years ago, where I did the 10-week online course. And then I went to my first Poland trip, and that Poland trip was mind-blowing. I sometimes say that, doing the 10-week online course was like taking aspirin, and then doing the Poland experience was like taking ecstasy. I mean, it was just like everything sort of expanded. And then last year in March, I went for another winter experience in Iceland with a Wim Hof instructor, which was wonderful. And I just wanted to go deeper. And I decided to become a Wim Hof instructor because I had this insight or this intuition that this will become a part of something in the future, but I yet don't know exactly what it is. And I really want to understand the method deeply. And the best way to learn something is to be able to teach it to someone. So that's the initial motivation. So it's not as if I had a very clear idea that I'm going to be a Wim Hof instructor and I'm going to be doing 20 workshops a year. But this is a cornerstone of something that will emerge. And I'm actually in the process of pulling all of that stuff together right now.
You've been now 3 times doing this winter expedition, Wim Hof winter expedition. The last one was the instructor's course. Was it different than the other ones before?
It was very different. In the sense that the purpose of it was the instruction. And the first time was amazing because it was the first experience. I had never been in such extreme cold environments. I had never done such deep, sort of profound power breathing. I had never connected with a group of individuals so deeply as I did in that particular trip. Iceland was just absolutely spectacular in terms of the natural environment and all of the scenery. It was just, Iceland. It's the perfect place to practice Wim Hof. And then the instructor course was very much about connecting with the other instructors and going deep in the method. So I was just very focused on learning, and a little bit less focused on the the cold exposure and the breathing, but just how to really understand the method to be able to teach it to someone. And then, of course, we had our wonderful adventure on Snieska, which it was probably made it the best of all, because the amount of learning from that experience was absolutely fantastic, and it also played an important role for me on the Kilimanjaro trek.
Okay, Kilimanjaro.
Kilimanjaro.
Yeah, let's jump right into Kilimanjaro finally. Tell me the first word in Bantu that comes into your mind.
The first word, sorry?
In Bantu, the language I suppose they speak over there.
Swahili. In Swahili.
Is it Swahili?
Jambo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say it's
I thought it's Bantu, but anyways, the language they speak over there. Yeah.
Jambo Buana.
I knew that you for sure know some words from there. What about the names of your porters? Do you remember those?
The names of the porters, no, but the guides definitely, because we interacted a lot more with the guides than with the porters. We had David, we had Salim, a guy called Good Luck that I thought was a wonderful name, Jackson. There was another guy that was one of the head summit porters called Yazin, that was a freaking rock star. I mean, this guy had dreadlocks. He was the one that was always leading all of the singing of all of the porters. We thought we were tough because, we're doing a speed ascent, Kilimanjaro. He's done the route in 12 hours.
Okay.
When we're walking down back to the main gate, we see him with two of his guys, 15-kilo duffel bags on their shoulders, running down the path. And this is a path full of rocks and things, and they're like just jamming and singing with, these 15-kilo duffel bags. And we're like, we're a bunch of wimps. It was very humiliating.
I think this is very important to understand for people, because we always think about the climbers who is reaching the summit, but the people around there, the guides, the porters, the Sherpas, they are actually doing an amazing job over there.
Yeah, they're the rock stars. I mean, they really are. They really are the rock stars. It's basically the route that we did is called the Marangu route, and it's about 36 kilometers from the gate to the Uhuru Peak. And these porters are carrying 15-kilo duffel bags on their backs with our food, our gear. We carry probably 5, 6, or 7 kilos on our own backs. But these guys are just, jamming up the mountain, smiling, happy. They're all thin. They're like little twigs, so they're not like big, massive individuals. But, they do this 2, 3, 4 times. You start to talk to some of these guys. They've, been on the mountain 100, 200, 300 times. And it's amazing. It's just the physical shape that these guys are in. Obviously, they're also used to the altitude. So, for them, it's really they're very acclimatized to doing this. But it's just the physical feat is really tremendous.
Yeah. What was the realization? When did you decide that, okay, Kili it is, I want to climb up there?
Okay, so this was very funny. We were at a dinner with 2 guys from the first Poland trip. In Miami, and there are 2 Rauls. One of them is Cuban, and the other's Colombian. And I hadn't seen them since we'd been to Poland. And we're just having a conversation, and they're both very fit and extreme guys. Just to give you an idea, one of the Rauls, the Colombian guy, had never seen snow, and he went to do the Poland winter experience. So he goes from never seeing snow to climbing a mountain at minus 25 degrees Celsius in shorts. The other Raul, it was an entrepreneur and has a couple of businesses in Miami in real estate and ambulance transport. His weekend activity, instead of playing golf, is he's part of the SWAT team in Miami. So, he doesn't do as many raids before, but, he would go raid drug lords on the weekend for fun instead of playing tennis or golf. So these guys are pretty extreme, but amazing individuals. And we're having dinner, and one of the Raul said, "Well, why don't we go climb Kilimanjaro?" I was like, "Yeah, sure, why not?"
Just like that.
Just like that. We were sort of inspired because obviously Wim has a world record in terms of some of the fastest group ascents. I mean, the fastest individual ascent, I think, is about 6 hours or so. There are all these sort of highly trained mountain runners that just summit mountains in crazy times, especially not the technical ones. But as far as a group ascent, where you get a group of people all the way up to the top of the mountain, and Wim had done it 3 times. And so we were inspired by the fact that it was doable. And we said, let's try to see if we can summit Kilimanjaro in less than 48 hours, shirtless or in shorts. So why not?
I like that. You already mentioned that it took 6 months for the preparation. Tell me about the preparation a little bit more.
Yeah. So basically, the preparation, I sort of put it on 2 separate buckets. One of them is a fitness bucket, and the other one is breath work. And even though we started getting ready probably 6 months before, I think the training really got a little bit more serious probably 3 months before the trek. And it's not as if you needed to be in great physical shape, but you want to make sure that you've got strong legs, that you've got you really build up your cardiovascular system, that you can, run 10 kilometers without feeling that your heart is going to, pop out of your head. And so all basically what I was doing is the normal routine that I was doing, but just trying to walk a lot every day, trying to walk easily, maybe 10 to 15,000 steps. So probably like 7 to 10 to 12 kilometers a day in the normal course of just everyday life. So when I said switching habits, instead of taking the metro to a meeting or taking a taxi to a meeting, well, I would walk to a meeting, give myself enough time. So I walk half an hour or 40 minutes to a meeting. And we then did in January, which was very important training, we did a back-to-back hike weekend. Because one of the things is that one of the best things to do in training for Kilimanjaro is actually go hiking. And we decided that it was very important to do back-to-back hikes. So go away for a weekend. And the first day we hiked for about 9 hours. And this was shirtless. And it was cold. It was probably like 0 or 1 degrees. We were in Switzerland in a beautiful area. And then the next day was another 5 or 6 hours, so that your legs get used to the feeling of what it's like to be walking for hiking for 9 hours, take a rest, and then be able to walk again the next day. And that was also an opportunity to test all of our gear and make sure that we're ready for all the different weather conditions. The other part was the breath work, and there were the regular Wim Hof breathing, but I also went very deep in a method called the Buteyko. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Buteyko, but basically Buteyko breathing, and there's a great book called Oxygen Advantage that seems very contrary to the Wim Hof breathing. But it's actually quite complementary. And essentially, the basis of Buteyko is that we breathe way too much. So one of the things that happens in the body when we breathe is we take in oxygen that goes into systems, goes into a physiological process, a cellular process, and then the body emits CO2, and the CO2 is what we exhale. Well, it turns out that it is the level of CO2 in our system that gives instruction to the red blood cells to release oxygen. So the oxygen binds to hemoglobin, to red blood cells, then they go through our system, And when the CO2 levels start to rise, then the message gets sent, release the oxygen, and that's when the oxygen goes into the system. So the idea of Buteyko is have less overall oxygen, increase the CO2, and you actually increase the oxygen delivery at a cellular level. So the practice is about breathing a lot less. So during the day, only breathe through your nose. Only breathe through your nose. At night, put some tape on your mouth. So you're only doing nasal breathing. And then there is a series of progressive exercises where you, with very light breathing, and sort of the idea is that you're breathing through your nose and you're not moving a nose hair. So it is very, very, very soft breathing. You're breathing maybe 20% of what you would normally breathe. And you then exhale and you hold your breath on an exhale. When you start to feel the first indications of air hunger, you start to breathe in very slowly. So you're really sustaining, and it gets very claustrophobic. And so you can do that for a minute or 2 minutes, and then you move into normal breathing and you cycle through again. And then you start to build up this practice so that you start doing breath hold walks. So you start walking, you exhale through your nose, and you take 30 steps. And then you start to breathe in really slowly for another 15, 20, 30 seconds, breathe normally again, and then repeat. And you see, because you play with your oximeter, is that you see your oxygen saturation go down, go down, go down, go down, go down. So what you're doing with this method is you're almost simulating high altitude, low oxygen environments. And you're telling the body, produce more red blood cells so we can more efficiently deliver oxygen when there's less oxygen around into the system. So about a month before the trek, and the trek was from the 3rd to the 6th of March, I sort of realized after this weekend in Switzerland that physically I'm in pretty good shape and that the trick is really going to be the breathing. And I really went very deep, doing maybe anywhere between half an hour to an hour and 15 minutes of the Buteyko breathing 2, 3, 4, 5 times a day. And what was amazing is I would notice that overall my breathing levels were just a lot lower. My heart rate was a lot lower also. So when I would go running, my heart rate wouldn't be as high. It's suddenly the body has gotten a lot more efficient at moving blood and delivering oxygen at a cellular level. Okay. And to me, those were sort of the two pillars of preparing.
All right. So you're saying that Buteyko method was actually a very key element of your breathing technique.
Yeah.
And then you said already that they went a little bit hand in hand with the Wim Hof method breathing, but I think we come to that more when you're climbing up. I'm very curious to know about that, but it's very fascinating to hear about the preparation that you found this different method that actually was really beneficial for the climb.
Yeah. And then the third thing was just mindset and the mindset training and really thinking about the challenge, thinking about the mountain. I mean, for me, it was very intimidating because the idea of, over 3.5 days, doing 72 kilometers of trekking and going up 4,000 plus meters and down 4,000 plus meters, I was like, whoa. I mean, in Switzerland, we did one day 9 hours. The other day, we did another 5 hours. We probably covered a total of 10 kilometers in a weekend. And, it was, I felt really good. But I'm saying, wow, Kilimanjaro is going to be 2 to 3 times that and at high altitude. So it was a very intimidating thing. So the mindset, the visualization. We also had a lot of team calls. So about every 3 or 4 weeks, we have a Skype call or a Google Hangout with all of the group, making sure, just sort of aligning ourselves as a team, make sure everybody was ready with all of their different equipment, because the group part of it is also very, very important when you do something like this.
All right. Then you went to Kilimanjaro. Or was there something very valuable to know before you are actually now in Africa?
No, I think that was pretty much it. I mean, then the mix of the excitement and the adrenaline and the fear were all embedded in there, because just we had no idea, and I had no idea what this was going to be, like. We went. We went there. We had actually we were a total of 13 in the group. We did a little small hike 2 days before the trek, and to these beautiful waterfalls. And that was just sort of like team building, get the body moving a little bit. We did a lot of Wim Hof breathing, the 2 days before. Then the day before was about training, sort of some team building, some breathing, equipment review, packing review. So everybody just, brought their backpacks and showed what they're going to take on the mountain, what their strategy is. And what's funny is there's some people that were just, a couple people that were not prepared. I mean, one guy wanted to summit the mountain in tennis shoes. I'm like, no. And he was asking, do you need a sleeping bag on the mountain? And it's like, there's been pages and pages of documentation and what equipment and what to take. But for the majority, it was really good just to go through the exercise of, this is what I'm carrying on the mountain, reduce the weight as much as possible. And then, we were off to the mountain on the 3rd of March.
Yeah. You said you did a lot of Wim Hof Method breathing the day before. What was the reason for that? Because earlier you mentioned that Buteyko method was the key element. Tell me about it.
So basically, the way I saw that these things came together really nicely is the Buteyko method, I feel, primed my system for much more efficient oxygen processing within the body. And on the mountain, where you start to get much lower levels of oxygen, you're almost by default doing Buteyko. If you just do normal breathing and you're on the mountain and you've got less oxygen, you're already doing Buteyko. But there, what we're going to be doing is the Wim Hof breathing to really pump up the amount of oxygen. And so I sort of felt that I fine-tuned the machinery in the vehicle off the track as a metaphor. But then on the track, I wanted to make sure that I could pump as much gasoline into the engine as I needed as I was going through the trek. So it was that combination of increasing the efficiency of oxygen delivery to then be able to manage the oxygen levels, because that is one of the ways that you really fight the acute mountain sickness, because it really is oxygen driven. So by being able to control how much oxygen I'm driving into the body, I was able to really manage the AMS symptoms. And
day before you actually start climbing, it's good to prepare your body
exactly
for the stuff that's coming up, the oxygenizing heavily.
And as you know from the method, it's very relaxing. And it just gets you into a great zone. So to be able to do half an hour of real intense power Wim Hof breathing, to then do visualizations of climbing the mountain and the trekking and getting your mental focus in line. And we also did a little bit of an ice bath. It's kind of funny. We ordered 100 kilos of ice so we could do a little ice bath in a bathtub the day before we left.
Get the team spirit up.
Exactly.
You said the word fear. Was there fear involved when you landed on Africa?
I think the fear had been turned into excitement. One of the things when we go in, connecting to the beginning of the conversation, in terms of the world of the biohacking, there's a bunch of stuff for me in the brain and the soul part of it, which is how you take control of your mental processes and take control over the things that you say to yourself and how your mind works naturally. And one of the big lessons of the things that I've been doing is how you need to embrace fear. There's this philosophy of overcoming fear. Like you need to fight fear. It's like, no, you need to go into fear. And once you embrace what you're scared of, you can get power from it. You can get energy from it. You can mutate it. Actually, chemically, the emotions of excitement or fear are very close to each other. So you can take control of fear and turn it into excitement, and then it's not a debilitating emotion. So when I got there, in the first times that we actually saw the mountain, it wasn't fear. It was more like, holy shit, that is a big mountain. And I would say it was more sort of humbling. And it's like, I wasn't scared of it, but it was more like, wow, this is big. This is a big beast.
Still a little bit about the fear. Is it just accepting it and then you're able to deal with it, or do you use some methods to overcome it?
So there's a couple of things. One is, I think the Wim Hof method, by definition, helps you overcome fear. Why? Because as you know in the method, you're really playing with the two parts of the autonomic nervous system, so the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, or the fight or flight and the rest and recovery. So as you're doing the breathing, as you're doing the cold immersion, you're building a lot of resilience, a lot of strength in moving from fight or flight to rest and recovery. So that already helps you to sort of get out, to reduce. You start breathing and you really can bring down your cortisol levels, your adrenaline, sort of the chemical reactions tied to a fear response. So Wim Hof method really helps you. Then there's a lot of meditations and some guided meditations around fear where you get yourself into a very sort of quiet meditative zone and you start to visualize the fear and you start to feel the fear as deeply as you can. And then you ask yourself, what is this fear trying to teach me? What's the lesson here? And the lesson, when I get scared about the mountain, my lesson would be, well, hey, I'm not training enough. I'm not prepared enough. So as you start to listen into the fear, it starts giving you messages of things that you could do that suddenly give you a little bit more strength. So you're embracing it and you're using fear as a teacher and something that can gives you signals. And this also connects to what we talked about before in terms of listening to your body and listening to your emotions. So what you don't want to do is repress the fear or deny that it's there, because then it stays there. But when you row into it and you say, okay, I am scared. Why am I scared? What is this scared feeling trying to tell me or teach me? And suddenly fear becomes a messenger. It's not something that you want to avoid, but something that you want to embrace to see what you learn from it.
That's very interesting. Fear as a teacher.
Yeah,
I gotta start using that. Okay, now you start climbing soon. Was it familiar for the people to see guys trying to walk up bare-chested?
Not at all. We were very lucky because we didn't really cross that many people. So it was actually wonderful because the route that we're taking was not full of people. When we started to get to the camps and going a little bit higher altitude, you get very funny faces. And I do remember at the hotel that we were staying at, it is a hotel where you get different groups that are doing Kilimanjaro. And we somehow got to be known as the guys who were going to summit in 2 days. And everybody thought we were a little bit nuts. And then we said, yeah, but we're doing it without shirts. And they said, you guys are absolutely crazy.
So it hasn't really become a habit there after Wim Hof been doing it?
No.
Okay. Well, if you think about AMS, and I read about it, there's a couple of things you should consider is like put on warm clothes and have a slow pace, go step by step many days, and you're just not doing that at all.
So, basically the trek sort of broke up as follows. The first day we started at about 1,700 meters at the Marangu Gate, or I think it was 1,900 meters at the Marangu Gate. And it was a 20-kilometer trek, about 2,000 meters of elevation change, up to a hut called the Horombo Hut. So that was about 8 or 9 hours of trekking. And what's so wonderful about Kilimanjaro is that you almost go through different continents. So the bottom part of it is a rainforest, and you've got monkeys, and it's a jungle. So being bare-chested there is not a challenge. Actually, the team was very split between people that took the malaria pills and not the malaria pills. So there's some people that, even though there's no mosquitoes at that altitude, were covering themselves because they didn't want to get bitten by mosquitoes. But the majority of the group was going shirtless. But that was not a challenge. After about 10 kilometers or 12 kilometers, you then clear the rainforest and you go to the moorlands. And there you start to feel a little bit of the chill. It's not very cold. But suddenly it's as if you've gone from being in the Amazon jungle to the Scottish Highlands. I mean, just not a lot of trees, low vegetation, very lush. Occasionally banks of fog come in and out. We did have a little hailstorm and a little bit of rain while we're doing the trek, and at that point we did put on rain ponchos. And then we got to the Horombo hut. So that was, a very easy, long trek. It was a lot easier than I thought because at the end it was 2,000 meters of elevation change. But in the second half, every hour or so, we just do some power breathing. We do sort of 20 or 30 power breaths, and then we would continue. And so then we got to the Horombo hut at 3,700, and there we spent the night. We did wake up in the middle of the night to do breathing, do a half an hour of breathing, because since we're not giving the body enough time to acclimate to the altitude, it's very important because when you sleep, your oxygen levels go down. So that you want to make sure that you're not letting the oxygen levels go too far down, because then you increase the risk of AMS symptoms. And what was to me was amazing is we all had our oximeters, and it was very normal to be walking and suddenly find yourself that you're at 80% oxygen saturation. Normally, you're at 97, 98%. And if you are at 80% and you walk into a hospital, they're going to put an oxygen mask on you. So we do the breathing, and I would always try to bring up my oxygen level back up to 95 or 96%. I slept like shit. I probably slept 4 hours that night because the altitude does affect the sleep. And mix of the adrenaline, the excitement. And then the next day, we would go from Horombo Hut to Kibo Hut. And Kibo Hut is at the base of the volcanic cone. And that was another 10 kilometers and another 1,000 meters. So that gets to 4,700 meters. So as you start to leave the moorland, you get to this really spectacular area called the Saddle, which is a volcanic desert. It's sort of this alpine desert because there's two peaks. There's Kibo, which is the one that you summit, and then there's another very dramatic peak called Mawenzi. And about at 4,000 meters is when you hit this plateau. And there, we're still fairly easy going, but we'd be doing a lot of breathing along the way. I do remember that sort of the last maybe 200 meters of elevation change to Kibo Hut, that's when I really started to notice the elevation. That if you walked a little bit too fast, you would just be winded. You need to stop and kind of like do 20, 30 breaths to then keep going. So we got to the Kibo Hut about 3.5 hours after having started the trek. And so it was about 1 p.m. And there the plan was to just rest, and then between midnight and 2 o'clock we would then go for the summit attempt. And there were 3 guys that were feeling really strong, and they decided to have lunch and do the summit attempt. So 3 guys took a guide, and they actually summited Kilimanjaro in 33 hours.
Wow.
So I was going to go with them, but then I said, look, I've never been at this altitude. Snieska came back and said, you know what? I don't want to be walking down the mountain at night. I've never been at this altitude, so I didn't go. Now, then sort of some odd things happened, because around 7:30 at night, I went outside to try to see their headlamps, because I was expecting them to be back about 8 or 8:30. And, I could see the headlamps right at the top of the rim. So I was like, great. And then I just went to lay down. I couldn't really sleep. But then this guy said around 9 o'clock, hey, the guys aren't back yet. And it's snowing. So I walked outside, and it was a full-on blizzard. And these guys were not back yet. And I was like, my first reaction is, good thing I didn't go. Second thing was, okay, I got to find out what's happening and talk to the head guide. And they were actually coming down, and they appeared half an hour later. And, they did a great job getting to the top. They just got hit by a blizzard on the way down, and it was really tough. I mean, they really had a very, very, very tough time, and it was snowing like crazy. So at 10:30 at night, I just said, I can't see us starting this trek at the slow group at midnight, another one at 2 a.m. I'm gonna suspend it until the weather clears. And I'll just pause there then, because I don't know if I'm rambling too much.
No, everything is good. It's very interesting. Did the happenings in Sniecka when we were up there, did they have a positive effect on this particular situation?
Absolutely.
Making the decision not going up there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's just like, unless I was feeling very comfortable about the environment, knowing that there's variability because of where you are, but starting a trek at 4,700 meters after essentially one day of walking in a snowstorm, the most difficult part of the mountain, to me, was just no. So the guide initially thought it was fine, but then he sort of agreed, and we said, okay, we'll look at what the weather looks like at 4 a.m. So I didn't go to sleep that night, and every half an hour I'd go outside to see if it was still snowing, and eventually around 1 o'clock or 1:15, the clouds cleared, there was no more snow, and it was just like perfect night. So I woke up the head guide and said, hey, no more snow. And so we started the summit attempt at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Nice.
And it was, magical, just because you could feel that you could grab the stars. It was chilly. At that point, we decided that we were going to be fully dressed, because the altitude was enough to deal with to then not be fully clothed. And we said, when the sun comes up, we can then make a decision if we go back to being shirtless. And so we just kept on trucking, a very slow pace, very measured. One guy in the middle started throwing up, so it was a little bit freaky as you're walking, and suddenly someone just go sort of uncontrollable vomit. Okay. But overall, it was, I was feeling great. I was doing a lot of breathing. So for that last attempt, I was breathing, almost doing the Wim Hof breathing all the way. And then every 10 or 15 minutes or 20 minutes, I would do 20 breaths or 30 breaths.
While walking?
Power breaths, and then while walking. Yeah. So I would just be walking at a normal pace, and then I would just go sort of like pump myself up with a lot of oxygen, and just kept on trucking. And it was amazing. As long as I kept the steady pace and kept the breathing going, I felt I could just go on forever. Okay. Around 6:37, the sun started to come up, and it was, I'll send you some pictures. I mean, it was just absolutely spectacular. I mean, we had really ascended a lot, but we had the toughest part of the mountain left, which is the last bit before you get to Gilman's Point, which is on the crater rim, is something called Jamaica Rocks. And it's a fairly steep grade, and it's just a boulder field. So there you kind of have to go through the boulders. I mean, you're not climbing, but it's almost like doing CrossFit at 5,500 meters. So there that felt endless. That is one of the parts that beats a lot of people, where they just get to that stage and they're like, this is too much, between the altitude and the physical effort. But, we cranked through that. And then at 9 o'clock, we were at Gilman's Point. Snow started, and it wasn't very bad. But since it wasn't very bad, we all took off our shirts. Then I think the mountain listened to us, cleared away the clouds, and then it was just this perfect sunshine. And then from there was about an hour and a half, 2 hours to the actual peak, the Uhuru Peak. And that was, the scenery was just amazing. But at that altitude, I noticed that if I went a little bit too fast, I would just get exhausted. The breathing needed to continue. We were probably walking at 1 kilometer per hour. So it's a very slow pace, very intentional. And what's very funny is about 150 meters distance before the famous sign of the peak, I just kind of decided that, wait, I'm going to switch my mode here. And I started to do very powerful breathing and started in my head to go through affirmation statements, gratitude statements, thinking about all of the things that I wanted to get rid of in my life and the things that I'd wanted to put into my life. And suddenly this life force took over. And I went from this very slow pace to... So I went trucking all the way up that last bit as if I was on a beach. I mean, it was the power of the mind to overcome the physiology was amazing, because 5 minutes before, if I would walk a little bit too fast, I'd have to stop and just like gather my breath. But here it's just kind of trucking. And obviously when we got to the top, I was just like the adrenaline and the endorphins and the excitement and everything was just, but I couldn't believe that I was standing almost at 6,000 meters. We didn't make the 48-hour window because of the delay in the snowstorm. So we got there in about 50 and a half hours, which is still amazing because it normally takes on this route 4 to 5 days to get there. But I just felt amazing. I mean, we were actually dancing and singing, and it was just absolutely fantastic experience.
Sounds really amazing. So none of you were experiencing any symptoms of AMS?
There were. So we were a group of 13, 12 guys and one woman. The woman who really, I admire her tremendously because she came on this trek as a big physical challenge, very overweight. I sort of felt that when I saw her after her first hour on the lower part, I was saying, there's no way she's gonna make it. She made it to 5,400 meters.
Okay. And
steady pace, breathing, mental focus, and it just a massive accomplishment. I mean, for her, on a relative basis, she was summiting K2 in terms of the challenge that it was to her being. And then the rest, there were 3 or 4 that were pretty exhausted by the time we got to the top. And they were part of a slower group that probably arrived 20, 25 minutes after we had gotten there. And 3 of them, eventually, when we got off the crater rim, needed assistance from the guides and were walking very, 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 very slow. And that was another Snieska moment, because when we were, fortunately it didn't get to be a Snieska moment, but when we were at the peak, the guide said that there was a gathering storm at the other side of the rim where we had come up. So he said, okay, guys, time to get that. We need to get off this mountain very quickly. So I had this vision of suddenly get caught in a snowstorm at this altitude as I saw all these mountains. So it was like, everybody, come on, we got to get moving. We got to get moving. We got to get off this mountain. Fortunately, when we got to Gilman's Point, which you start to go down the cone, it was snowing, but it was not as bad and ominous as it looked. We just couldn't see what was on that other side of the rim. And then from that place down, there was, one guy in particular that needed to be sort of held to go down the mountain. Another guy that was very sort of physically built, didn't do a lot of the breathing training, especially the Buteyko. He also needed some help. And a couple other guys just needed to go very, very slow. But I would say that 4 or 5 of them did get hit pretty hard with some of the AMS symptoms. Still manageable because they were able to, walk themselves with some assistance. But we did have to put 3 people on stretchers at Kibo, because by park rules, once you come off the summit, you have to go all the way down to Horombo. You can't spend the night at Kibo because it's still very high. So you need to go all the way down. And 3 of these folks were just not up for another 10-kilometer, 1,000-meter drop after summiting the mountain. So they put them on these, essentially it looks like you take a bed frame and you put it on a wheel with a shock absorber and kind of get taken down in sort of a very, very, very bumpy ride. One of the guys actually just got off at one point because he said the bouncing on this thing was way worse. But once everybody got down to lower altitudes, everybody was perfectly fine. But there were people that were hit. I was in my own physiology. I was very strong, very surprised, very, very surprised.
Maybe the other guys would have benefit also about the positive affirmations.
I think one of the guys was definitely psychologically beaten by the mountain. I think that's one of the things that a trek like this does, is that you face your dragons, and if you let the psychology take over, it then becomes really difficult. He then gained it all back, but it's when you think you can't. It's that simple. And he, at one point, one of the guys was convinced that he was not going to get off the mountain. He just sort of felt that he was way too exhausted, and that, his heart rate was going all over the place. It was going from 227 to 35. I mean, he was just like, his body was going nuts. But then he was perfectly fine.
How important part of the whole journey is the descending? To keep the focus, keep the breathing steady, keep the concentration throughout the whole journey.
Very important down to Kibo, because that is steep terrain. It's also fun because you can essentially, since it's a lot of sand, you can start to do that scree running and the scree skiing down the slope. So you actually can descend very fast. But you mustn't forget that you are at very high altitude. So the focus is really important to Kibo. And then the next section, I think since at that point we decided not to be bare-chested anymore, it was very pleasant, and it was strenuous, but at that point I think the focus wasn't as critical. The breathing was important, but you're descending. So suddenly you start to feel that, you do feel that the oxygen is denser. And, you look at the oximeter and the levels aren't as low. I mean, when you're up there, I remember one night at the Kibo hut, I really didn't sleep. So I was doing a lot of breathing, and then I tried to meditate and then check my oxygen levels. And at one point they were at 49%. And I was like, holy shit. But I was feeling fine. But this thing is telling me I'm at 49%. I need to bring it up. So I would say the focus, once you get off the summit peak and you're at Kibo, you can then start to dial it down. But you want to be careful, because there's still a lot of distance to cover, and you could twist your ankle, and if you're not careful where you place and where you walk, you could hurt yourself.
The worst memories on that journey? Are there any?
I think, to me, the worst memories would just be two. And again, I don't consider them sort of bad memories at all. One is that fear that came in when the guys that went to Summit weren't back and it was snowing, to suddenly think that, oh no, mountain rescue operation, what's happened to these guys? That lasted 5 minutes, because then when I talked to the head guide, he had been talking with the other guide, so they were fine. They were coming down, they just hit snow, and it was a little tough, but they were fine. But, at that point, that was not a very pleasant moment. And then the other one is coming off the peak, seeing these storm clouds coming. It was sort of like, oh, okay. And I started to go down, since I was feeling great, I started to go down very fast. But then I stopped and I looked back and I realized that there's a couple of guys that are going very slow. So I decided to go back up to sort of help them. We had enough guides to take care of everyone, but I just wanted to make sure that the things were okay. But I did have that thought in my mind of, should I just take care of myself and just get off the mountain, or should I help these people? Similar to the situation in Snieska. I mean, do you find yourself in a good situation? Do you help others, or do you just kind of protect yourself and not become a liability for someone else? So Those to me were probably, and then probably the third moment, and this was before being on the mountain, is having to have the discussion with one of the guys about you can't go up this mountain in sneakers. I mean, it's just you need to have a waterproof jacket. You need to have boots. You cannot. So having to have that discussion after all of the preparation and all of the team alignment and all of the documentation was just kind of like, come on, this is irresponsible. But those are, grains of sand in a massive beach of euphoria in terms of what this experience was.
Best memories then?
Best memories, standing on top of that mountain, feeling just absolutely amazing, dancing, and literally we were singing, there's a song that is the Kilimanjaro song, there's Jambo, Jambo Wana, Havarigani, and when you're crossing other trekkers, you sort of sing that song, and just being up there shirtless with the guides, singing this song, dancing, just to me seemed like just amazing, especially after that sort of affirmation, gratitude, power walk to the summit.
Biggest learning experience?
There's a couple. One, that the body is capable of a lot more than we think, and that a lot of it is in the mindset. We hear that a lot with Wim's message, but when I look back at the statistics of what we did, according to my little Apple Watch, in a little over 3 days, because we were in the park a total of 80 hours, we did 107 kilometers of trekking, 4,100 meters up, then down. But then you also have a lot of other ups and downs. So God knows how much actual elevation on a total of 10 hours of sleep. I mean, I didn't sleep the night before the summit. So to think about the distance, the physical effort, the lack of sleep, to me is just amazing as a physical feat. And that was all the mindset. Second thing, the power of the group. And this is also something that you learn when you do one of the winter experiences, is the strength of the group in being able to accomplish something is so critical. I mean, because you give strength and you get strength from a group of individuals. Pacing, the rhythm. Going it's very famous there to say pole pole, which is slowly is just getting into the pace. And if you get the right pace, you'll get there, hands down. And the biggest lesson for me which is what this mountain was about, is that the mountain is a metaphor. To me, the mountain is a metaphor for life. Is you have to set bold, ambitious goals for yourself. You have to prepare for them. You have to prepare physically. You have to prepare mentally. You have to think that you can accomplish it. And so having accomplished that is the sense of empowerment that anything is possible. So it's like if you put your mind to it, you can make it happen.
You think this was an important expedition for you, for the rest of your life, to become a stronger person?
Absolutely. There's no doubt. There's no doubt. And I think it's funny because I had written this post about why do Kilimanjaro, where I sort of explained the reasons why and what got me into this. And I shared it to some family members, and then they shared it with some other friends, and they my sister said, well, all my friends are kind of saying, I need to find my Kilimanjaro. Like, I need to find that one thing that helps me, get into great physical shape, set a goal and go for it. And I do think that there's something incredibly healthy at any point in life, especially at a midpoint in my sort of 50 years, to be able to challenge yourself, to do something that you think you can't, and be able to do it, because it just gives you a tremendous sense of empowerment for what can come and what you can create.
If I would be now willing to conquer this mission to go to Kilimanjaro, what would be your 3 advices? The 3 biggest advices for me at the moment?
Okay, so first, get a really good local tour operator, which I can definitely recommend because the people that we work with, which is a company called Climbing Kilimanjaro, were absolutely fantastic. And the two things that I mentioned before: work on the fitness, work on the breath, and work the body, work the breathing, work the mindset, and you would have no problem. You would probably be one of the guys that would do it in 33 hours.
Doubt it though. But let's see. Maybe this, I don't know. It's it's in my mind already, but not yet. We'll see.
Yet.
We'll see. Do you think mountaineers and mountain climbers would benefit on these breathing techniques, Buteyko and Wim Hof method?
Absolutely, no doubt. I don't remember which of the 3 trips that Wim Hof did. It might have been the first one in 2014, where they did do some research on the trekkers. And the conclusion of that piece, and there's a link on the Wim Hof Method website, just in the science section to this one research paper, that it was confirmed that this could be very useful in attenuating acute mountain sickness symptoms. In my own experience, in myself and the people that were sort of pretty disciplined in practicing the breathing, absolutely. I mean, I was up at 6,000 meters without any altitude sickness symptoms, without having acclimatized to the mountain. And there were quite a few others that were in really good shape, like myself. I remember almost 20 years ago, I went to climb Mount Shasta, which is a little bit over 4,000 meters. And I remember getting to the peak and having this throbbing headache that was just pounding. And I just needed to, go down, and then it went away. And that was 20 years ago. So it's my 30-year-old body versus my 50-year-old body. And I have no doubt that the breathing protocols were key in keeping all of these AMS symptoms at bay. And another bonus, which to me was a little bit of unanticipated, was because of the amount of oxygen and the type of breathing that we were doing, there's a lot less lactic acid buildup in the body. So after 107 kilometers of trekking up and down, I did not have any muscle soreness. Yes, my legs were tired, but I was on the van back to the hotel, coordinating to see if I could start a safari the next day at 6 o'clock in the morning, because I knew I did not need the day of rest at the hotel. I was ready to go. I was ready to get moving. So absolutely anybody that is into mountaineering and high altitude, I have no doubt that this can really help with acute mountain sickness. And anyone that is into hiking in general, even though you're not going into high altitude, really training your breathing and learning how to use your breathing as a tool to help you on your hikes is great, because you just get a lot more out of it. I mean, you don't get as winded, you don't get as tired, you don't get as sore. It's like, you can enjoy your activity a lot more and really think of breathing as part of your fitness training to enjoy your hiking and your trekking.
And it seems like it really helps the recovery as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's no doubt. I mean, no doubt in my mind.
How amazing has this been? I'm just so, truly, can't really find any words, but I'm so happy that you're talking about and sharing this expedition and all the perspective and everything that is really involved. And it is a matter of mind, the power of mind, and this Kilimanjaro. We all have our Kilimanjaros in our lives.
Yeah.
And this is just one step, and you don't have to climb up to the mountains, as you said.
Exactly.
Just find your Kilimanjaro and conquer that, and you will benefit so much in your life when you challenge your fears and go towards them.
Exactly.
Amazing.
Exactly.
Couple of more questions I still have.
Sure.
What is your next biggest biohack? Just let's say like the next biohack.
So I am now going into the mind. I sort of feel that the body, I've got good protocols for the body, and now going into the mind. And that involves different types of meditation, different types of mental hacks to sort of reprogram your thinking around things, Yeah, I gave you a couple examples around fear. There's some very powerful meditations around forgiveness. There's a woman called Marissa Peers that I also discovered through Mind Valley that does some really interesting rapid transformational hypnotherapy. And it's just really sort of very interesting to rewire thought processes. And especially, what are the things that you say to yourself, and what are the images that you have in your mind, and how to swap the ones that you don't want and put in. So I would say that the next chapter is really around mindset and about the mind.
Interesting. What if you would get a superpower now? What would it be, and how would you use it?
If I had a superpower, there's one that is a very dangerous superpower, and this goes back to I think it was a Greek story called the Ring of Ganges. I don't know if it's actually Greek, and that's where Lord of the Rings came from. But I think if there was a superpower, is the ability to become invisible. And be able to become invisible to be able to affect change in certain situations. And so imagine if you could suddenly and it comes with a tremendous amount of responsibility, obviously, because you're able to witness things without anybody knowing, and then be able to change the course of events and things. Fascinated by the superpower of being able to be invisible.
What would you change then?
I would probably put a lot of attention on politics and expose a lot of shit that I think deserves to be exposed, because I think we're just being misled left and right. And the ability to, bring some of those things to light, hopefully, would make the world a little bit better. But actually, I think more than a superpower is connecting a little bit with this passion I'm trying to develop, is really develop this ability to help others unleash, their inner potential. So if I could really build a great skill set in making people realize that they can do and be so much more, do it for myself, do it for my kids, and do it for others as a business. To me, if I could really develop that as a superpower and just become really, 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 really good at doing that, I think my life would be awesome.
I think you have that superpower already. You can actually do that with all the experiences, all the knowledge, so you can really help people to change their lives. I know that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
What makes you feel down?
Negativity. When I come across people that are not even aware of how negative they are. And I just think negativity is a part of a survival wiring that we had, many millennia ago. You needed to walk out of the cave and be scared. You needed to be fearful of, the lion, the bear, the tiger. That today is negativity around situations, rather than seeing the opportunities. So I was just walking back from dropping my kid off at school, and I was discussing with this parent about vacation plans for Easter. And I would keep on suggesting a bunch of things. Oh no, well, I really don't want to travel there. Well, I'm not sure if I really. No, it's like I don't know if it's really that safe. Like everything was no. So I think that, to me, takes energy away. Whereas a predisposition to what is possible, you might not want to do it, which is fine, but the not being so categorically closed and negative, to me, is probably what brings me down the most, versus being sort of more open-minded and open to opportunity.
I agree, you 100%. When I see people here in Finland as well, they're walking and they look so packed with negative energy, and they don't know anything else probably, but this creating the image that everything could be better and this is negative and that is negative, and you can actually see in their eyes and how they react in a certain situation, how they walk. So
no, it's
negativity, gotta get rid of that.
Yeah, life is an attitude, and I keep on thinking about the guy that I mentioned earlier in the podcast, this guy Yasin. I mean, he's a high mountain porter in Kilimanjaro, but the guy he sings. He's the leader of his group. He sings to get all of the songs going with all of the porters. He's running down the mountain with a 15-kilo duffel bag on his back, singing happy as a clam. I mean, he could be like, oh, fuck, I hate this job. It's like, no, he's like, he loves it because he's got the attitude. It's mindset.
He would be the best mental coach there is.
Exactly.
What makes you happy?
Enjoying life, being up on that mountain, seeing the smile in my kids, having a wonderful dinner with my wife. To me, happiness is about fulfillment. It's about just feeling that the glass is very, very full of the daily experiences that you live.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you very much for this eye-opening and very, very interesting conversation.
Well, thank you, Tommy, for inviting me, and I'd like to see you on Kilimanjaro soon.
We'll see about that. Thanks.
Awesome. Okay. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Jambo bwana